You ever watch a scary movie? And I don't mean a scary demonic movie, but just a scary movie like about a scary character like Jason Voorhees or even Michael Myers from Halloween, right? And the reason it's so scary is because those characters are out to hurt people. And a lot of times after those movies, you'll end up thinking to yourself, my God, I hope I never run into somebody like that. But you want to know what's crazy? As you get older, you start to realize that it seems like most of the time people hurt people, it's actually somebody they know. Today I heard the story of a 10-year-old Taveras, Florida boy that was sent to the emergency room by his mom and his mom's boyfriend. This 10-year-old was in such bad condition from prolonged torture from, of all people, his mom and her boyfriend, that the detective that was talking about this actually started weeping, breaking down and crying while she was describing that basically from head to toe, this 10-year-old boy was littered with bruises and burn marks. The parents actually dropped him off at the emergency room, and because the abuse was so severe, they overheard the nurses and the staff calling the authorities, so they actually ended up taking off. Now, a couple days later, the mom returned and to the hospital where she turned herself in, and the boyfriend, I guess, turned himself in a couple of days or a couple of hours later. The boy was in such bad shape, he had to be airlifted to Arnold Palmer's Children's Hospital, where to this moment, he is literally still fighting for his life. Why do these things happen, and why do they always happen at the hands of people that are supposed to protect them and love them? Now, this obviously happened in Florida, but the other day here in Arizona, there was some sort of grandma or aunt that actually was like torturing her grandchild or something. I don't remember the exact story, but it was basically the same situation where when people see the 13 or 14-year-old child, all of a sudden they're thinking that that 13-year-old is like 8 because they're that severely malnutritioned. Why does this happen? Why don't neighbors and friends mention something when they see red flags? Well, sometimes those red flags can be hidden. They were talking to the neighbors, and a lot of the neighbors were saying, we knew that they had children, but we very rarely saw them outside playing. Sometimes not seeing kids can be a red flag, but how do you call the authorities and say, hey, I haven't seen the neighbor's kids in 2 or 3 weeks and I'm worried? It's one of those things that people very rarely do. I just thought it was sad because it's like to beat your child or any child to the point where they're within, inches of their life. Holy moly, what kind of evil do you have inside you to do that? Their neighbor, Elizabeth Edmond, was shocked. The mom is 37-year-old Kim Mills. The boyfriend is 36-year-old Andre Walker. And they were showing their picture, and it's just like, how selfish do you have to be? Because a lot of times parents want to go out and do their own thing, right? And so what they probably did with this kid is they probably beat him to a pulp and just let him sit there by himself. You can almost imagine all the nasty, horrible things they did to this kid. The detective's name was Courtney Sullivan. And you guys know as well as I do that these detectives see some of the most heinous, horrible crap on the regular. And whenever you see somebody like that breaking down in tears, it's because there's a piece of them that probably feels guilty that they didn't get there even 5 minutes sooner, that something didn't that nothing could be done to help this child. What do you think should happen to people like this? Do you think that they should go away for a long, long time? Do you think that they should ever be able to have kids again? Should they actually get a severer penalty than what most people would normally get for such a thing? When you're 10 years old, think about us when we were 10, guys. We were walking home and watching Scooby-Doo reruns, right? We were watching Gilligan's Island. We were learning how to maybe do cursive letters if you're my age, right? We were doing such innocent things. And if you worried about anybody, you might have been worried about the local bully at your school. You shouldn't have to worry about your mom. And what really gets me is that some women will actually have boyfriends in their life that are just okay with beating the crap out of their kids. That happened even when I was younger. I remember I would have buddies and they'd be like, yeah, that's my mom's boyfriend, or that's my stepdad. And I just remember that you could just sense that they loved almost intimidating their kids. Did you ever meet a stepdad like that? Or did you ever meet a kid who had a dad like that? Where it's like, what did you say? And they're so quick to get in their kids' faces, like they're literally gonna beat them up and stuff. I never liked parents that were like that. Now, the truth is, I don't see too many parents that are like that anymore, but that's what makes these stories so horrible, is to know that there are parents like that. And I bet you if these parents were out on the town and you put a microphone in your face and you said, can you believe there's parents that do these horrible things to their kids? I bet you they would shake their head left to right and say, God, it's a shame, isn't it? Knowing that they're doing those same horrible things to their kids. It's a beautiful world. There's a lot of beautiful people that would never do those things, but it's just kind of sad to know you could live right next door or right across the street from somebody that's literally being abused, and you might not ever have any idea that it's happening. I've been hearing these stories the past handful of years of kids that were just locked in closets, living in cages like animals, having to fend for themselves. The other day I heard a story where they were saying that the kids were like 10, 11, 12 years old. It was like a brother and sister, and they didn't even know how to properly use the toilet and the sink to wash their hands. Why? Because their parents had treated them like, I don't even know how you would explain it, like tortured prisoners their whole lives. They literally didn't even know how to be a human in many cases. Just sickening stuff. If you guys have been hearing about these stories a little bit more than normal as well, let me know down below. I hate how this world sometimes makes us feel powerless. You can make a decision that, hey, I'm not going to treat my kids that way. And you can make a decision that, hey, I'm not going to abuse my parents, right? Because some people abuse their parents and grandparents. But it still doesn't change the fact that there's people out there that do. All you can do is throw your hands up in the air and pray for those kids. No matter how hot it is, the shade always feels so much better. A lot of times you'll hear these stories on the news and they make you shake your head and say, that's too bad. You know in your heart you can't really do much about it, right? So you try to let it go. But the sad thing is that's just the one story that made it out to the public, right? That you heard. For every one story you hear, there's probably thousands that you're never going to hear about. Every now and then you'll meet adults and they're just not all there. And a lot of times there's a piece of me that just thinks, oh my God, they partied too much and they literally lost their mind. But in some cases, it could be kids that grow up in these situations where they can't even trust their parents to protect them. You know, so there's movies out there where Michael Myers plays the bad guy and we all freak out thinking about Michael Myers. But there's a lot of kids that just grow up and it's like their Michael Myers in their life is their mom, in some cases their dad. I hate these stories of abusive boyfriends and stuff. It's like, what gives you the right to start, abusing someone's kid? I feel bad for stepdads because a lot of times stepdads are in situations where the kids are rude and they have to kind of maintain their calm and their poise, right? Because they just know, I'm not going to start disciplining this child, right? But the reality is, there's the opposite of that. There's people that say, I don't care, your dad's not here, you're gonna listen to me, these are my rules. And man, there's just some mean SOBs out there. If only everybody was kind. If you were a naturally kind person, I don't think you could put your hand on a kid, could you? You guys see what I'm saying here? You have to be naturally mean and an ass. And it's just like, I can't believe this woman chose this man as her boyfriend. If she would have chose a God-fearing man that actually cared about himself and about women and about kids, she probably would have been led down a completely different life. I've just seen this happen so much, where women kind of just let the man do whatever. Oh, horrible. I know you guys probably aren't going to write a comment down below, but I know if you can hear my voice, we almost all, back in the day, had a couple friends where you just knew their parents were strict. That's how we would describe it too. If others were to ask us, we would say, hey, Billy's parents, they're just really strict and stern. And that was kind of a nice PC way of saying they'll whip his ass. You know, when you have to threaten to whip your kids, there might be something wrong there. Now, I'm not saying that it's necessarily the most horrible thing to give your kids a spanking, right? We come from that train of thought that if your kid runs into the street, you got to give him a spanking so he knows never to run in the street again. But I think we can all agree that's different than just teeing off on your kids. Like, how low of a human being do you have to be? Did you guys ever watch that movie Forrest Gump? I don't know if you guys remember this, but there's a part in that movie where it's really hard to be friends with Jenny. Because if you remember, Jenny loved Forrest, yet she cheated on him and just kind of treated him like I don't know, she just ran over him and treated him poorly. And you get to the point where it's hard to like Jenny. But if you remember earlier in that movie, when her and Forrest first became friends when they were kids, her dad was like abusing her. You remember? And so what you kind of forget during that movie is that there's a reason Jenny is the way she is. I think in that movie, they would lead one to believe that she became the way she was because her father treated her in a horrible way. As an adult, you can kind of appreciate Jenny's point of view. She was going to constantly be running, looking for approval from different men because her dad was such a bad example of what a man could be. A lot of times when we think about Forrest Gump, we think about that bench scene, right? Where he's like, Mama said, life is like a box of chocolates, right? We remember Forrest Gump as being this happy-go-lucky comedy that we all loved. But the reality with that movie is there's a lot of sad moments. A whole lot of sad moments. If you remember at the end, they kind of lead us to believe that Jenny, hi guys, that Jenny was dying of, I think she was dying of AIDS at the end of that movie. They never really said it, but didn't you guys get that same vibe? Like she was dying of HIV or of AIDS or something? That movie is one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. But it's such a sad movie. Even at the end, if you remember, they show his son going to school and there's a little white feather that kind of floats up in the air. And if you've watched it as many times as I have, there's a piece of you that kind of gets emotional at the end. It's a fine line on whether people become successes or failures in this life. And I think one of the best things we can do as parents and grandparents is just try to love your kids as much as you can and be thankful that you're in their life and somebody like these people aren't. I just think the worst of these type of parents. I think these are the type that I would be okay if they gave them life in prison, you know? I'll give you a quick update about my buddy Jack and then we'll get into some comments. Jack is my friend and we were really close. We used to play a lot of poker together about 15 years ago. And then we had somewhat of a falling out. He ended up kind of going through some tough times with a couple of girls he was dating. And long story short, he started to kind of fall into some addictions. And in case you're wondering, why are you telling your friend's business? He actually talks about this on his YouTube channel. His channel is called Jackson Pierce. And one of the things that has impressed me about him is he's been doing his YouTube channel for I think going on 4 or 5 years now. And he really loved his channel. And last night I was just kind of texting him back and forth just for a minute. And it was over the course of hours, so it wasn't like an active conversation. It was one of these where you wait 2 or 3 hours for a response type conversations that are common nowadays. And basically I asked him, I said, do you have aspirations of doing YouTube long term or what? And he goes, I'm trying to look for a real job, if that answers your question. And it did kind of answer my question. You know, this YouTube thing can be very alluring, because he had a situation where he exploded in popularity and he was actually making money on his YouTube channel, but slowly but surely he kind of hit his peak. And I guess over the last year or two, it's gotten to the point where his channel is a lot like mine. Now, mine's only been around for 11 going on 12 months, so I'm okay that it's slow from time to time. Still gets me down like all heck, right? Gets me really blue how slow the channel goes at times. But imagine if you had 25,000 subscribers and you were getting numbers like I am. That would be really depressing. That would take depressing to a higher level, you know? But that's one of those things where now he's trying to go back to a regular traditional job, and I think it's kicking him in the butt. On top of that, when he was kind of making some bad decisions in his 20s and 30s, he kind of developed a little bit of a record. And because of his record, he's getting to the point where even when he gets a job that he really wants, they won't hire them because maybe they have a policy where they don't hire people with a criminal background. So just imagine that. You know, you and me, we go and we try to find a job, and it might take us a couple months, right? We might even have to settle for something. But imagine a whole life where every time you're trying to look for any job, you end up having to settle. That's a tough deal. So that's what my buddy's going through. He's going through a YouTube channel that is pretty much dead. He doesn't really see any light at the end of the tunnel. He's gotten himself to the point where it's hard for him to do a traditional job. And then even if he wants a traditional job, no one will hire him. That's how things snowball on you. That's why I think it's scary when people go get a credit card and say, well, I'm just going to have it for emergency situations, because something's going to happen and you're going to have to start using that credit card. And then your life gets ruined. Not everybody's, of course. One more thing about Jack. When he was first starting his YouTube career, he was also writing rap lyrics and stuff. He's one of these guys that has a lot of goals and aspirations. And he was getting to the point where every day he would call and text, not to say hello, how are you doing, but simply to say, hey, can you watch this video and give it a thumbs up and share it with people? And when you first hear that about your buddy that's doing a YouTube channel, it's real easy to say, yeah, sure, I don't have a problem with that. So you watch his video, you give him a thumbs up, you try to support him the best that you can, but you're not in it for life, right? You don't want to deal with that every day. And Jack got to the point where almost all of his friends no longer saw themselves as his friends. They saw themselves as somebody that was going to get a phone call from Jack every day to ask them to do something. And let's be honest, it's not always easy to take time out of your life to go watch somebody's YouTube video. So fast forward to the present. You've got a YouTube video that's not doing so hot, and now you're trying to connect with friends, but friends are so used to you calling because you have an ulterior motive, right? Some sort of agenda, that pretty soon your friends stop answering the phone. So my poor buddy Jack is in one of these situations where he kind of feels really stuck. And I think that's what happens to us as human beings. That's why I always try to tell you, have empathy for others, you know? Sometimes you look at people and you say, golly, Jack, you had this channel that was making you a couple $100 a month. That's not the time to quit your job and dive into your channel. That's the time to work your butt off at your job and your channel so that you can get some money saved up. But see, that would be naive and unfair of me because I don't really know what happened, because we live in a world where instead of picking up the phone and talking about it, we just talk in cryptic messages to one another. Could you imagine talking to a buddy for the first time in about 8-9 years, and instead of talking and hearing their voice, you just hear you see a couple lines on the text message they send you, and then you respond to it 2 or 3 hours later, and then they respond to you 2 or 3 days later? There's an extreme disconnect. It used to be if you had a good buddy and he or she was going through a tough time, you would at least be a shoulder for them to cry on. Now I guess people just don't really have the time for it. Martika Garcia says, you know, the devil's in those parents. They're evil, evil, evil. Prison for life, no parole. See, what happens is you watch the news and you actually pay attention to the story. And if you have any type of heart, any type of soul within you, it irritates you. And you say to yourself, I don't want to ever see that lady or her boyfriend ever again for the rest of time. I want them to be under the jail. And that's the thing. There's so many bad people out there that if people actually watched the news, put themselves in the position of that little kid, you know how evil you have to be to attack somebody so innocent? You're really a precious being when you're 9 and 10 years old. For anybody to attack you, and then for it to be your mom, let those people rot in jail for the rest of their lives, and everybody else that's guilty of similar crimes. What the real shame is that some people will get 5 years in a minimum security prison, and they'll be out, you know, ready to enjoy their life in 5 years. Other people, they go behind bars for the rest of their life. I think everybody that does this to their kids deserves to go to jail forever. I really do. DJ says, very sad and heartbreaking. What the F is wrong with people? May we ever see peace and no suffering? ? I'm crying just listening to this. I'm telling you, they could probably fill us with endless stories of this crap. What's really horrible is that some of these people get out and end up having kids again and treating their future kids horribly as well. These are people that should not be allowed to have children if they're ever allowed out. To know that you beat your child up so bad that you better go drop him off at the ER, and then they did literally drop him off and started running. Oh my God. Lorena Thorpe says, if he was regularly attending school, why didn't his teacher notice his past injuries? The detective started those extensive injuries, or stated that those extensive injuries were in various stages of healing. You know, a lot of times you'll hear about these people and they're actually not attending school. That's the one danger with kids that are home taught. You never know if their parents are actually teaching them anything or if they're just abusing them. Now, I'm sure 99% of people that get home taught are probably taught by loving parents. But again, you never know if somebody's just an atrocious person. I feel so bad. You can't help who you're born to. And for this woman to have this child and then, oh my God, she must have hated his father. That's the only thing I can see. Maybe you hate this child's father so much that you see that child's father in your kid's eyes, and it just makes you want to beat him or something. That's the only thing I can think of. My grandfather, who I was never close to, he and my grandmother had my mom and my 2 uncles. And my grandfather was very abusive to my 2 uncles, and he wasn't very nice to my mom either, if you know what I mean. Just abused all 3 of them in so many ways. And all through their life, those kids treated my grandpa like he was just a king. They just absolutely loved and adored him. And it just always made me sick. It seems like people that just don't deserve love and adoration. It seems like people go out of their way to love these people. Just kind of cruel and crazy. But guys, that's why I walk. There's so many things about this world that are cruel and crazy. one of the things that we need as humans is an outlet where you can kind of normalize and bring emotions back down. That's why I recommend a half-hour walk each and every day, and I hope you walk with me again tomorrow. I'll see you then.